And just I'll forewarn you, mine won't be that short.
We know.
All right, all right. Well, it's good to be saved, though, isn't it? That's good to be in church. And if you think about it, there's probably something else that's good. Okay, let me mention a couple things about the book table. I had somebody tell me one time, you know, Christians, I have what we call, Christians play what I call conviction poker. And that is, you show me a conviction and I'll see your conviction and raise you one. And a guy come up to me one time, he was looking way down his nose, and he said, you have a book table here. I was glad he could see. And he said, don't you think that, don't you have a conviction against money changing in the church? And I said, well, yes, actually I do. I have a conviction against it. I think it's a terrible thing to do. Fortunately, my wife has no conviction about anything. That's why she'll be back there to take your money. All right. This book here, it's called The Bread of Life. It is what I call, it's just the best book I've ever seen that's just a general biblical knowledge book. I get a lot of people that say, I just like to, kind of a general knowledge of the Bible. I'll read you the table of contents so you can see what's all covered in here. There's a chapter on repentance, Trinity of God and man, necessity for salvation, understanding salvation, baptism of the Holy Spirit, walking in the Spirit, study on faith, understanding prayer, forgiveness, the armor of God, Christian suffering, dispensations, the deity of Jesus Christ, which Bible is God's book, is the Bible true, study on water baptism, eternal security, all about hell, facts about tongues, separation, soul winning, what about tithing, what about tithing, what about tithing? I'm sorry, it's not in there 3 times. I just thought you probably needed to hear it 3 times. Anyway, healing, the rapture, Christian judgment, the Antichrist, the millennium, the white throne judgment. There's a chart on prophecy. There's a section on the world. Good man, I see him coming. Help. The flesh and the devil. Addictions. Capital punishment, characteristics of God, sound doctrine, gossip and slander. Now that's not a how-to chapter. Homosexuals, that's not a how-to chapter either. Two creations, fact or fiction, defeating your Goliath, imaginations and fantasies. It is just a very, very good through the Bible book. I don't know if this would apply to anybody, but thank you very much, brother. But it is also the only book that we also carry in Spanish. So if you've got a Spanish-speaking friend and you think something in that book might help them, we have that in Spanish. I don't think we have it on the table, but we have it. This book here called Fight On. No, this is not about a Baptist business meeting, okay? Probably a good book for a Baptist business meeting. Hardcover, pointed corner, probably stop a small caliber round. But guys, when I was raised in this country, I was raised in a country that used to exalt heroes. And everybody grew up wanting to be a hero. You remember wanting to be a hero? You guys may not realize who you got preaching for you, but I personally sank every leftover German and Japanese ship from World War II. Sank them myself when I was 9 years old. You say, where were they? They were in a creek out in back of my house. I did that while I built a hydroelectric plant and fought Indians, because back then you were allowed to fight Indians. But you say, well, what are you talking about? I'm talking about everybody wanting to be a hero, because our country exalted heroes. Now it exalts victims, and everybody wants to be a victim. Surely you've got a friend. You don't ask them how they're doing, because they'll tell you and tell you and tell you. Well, let me tell you, no, that's okay. I don't really care. Okay? And I just say this, guys. If you just want somebody to kind of just sit there across from you, hold your hand, have a little compassion for what you've been through, I am not your guy. Okay? But don't feel bad. The government's got a guy for you. Dial 1-800-YOUR-GUY. They'll send him. He'll bring a check from the government, slap your parents, sue your boss. But I'll tell you what I will do. I will do anything I can to keep you going for the Lord. And that's what these are about. These are basically, they're one-page stories. Okay, here's one that goes for 2 pages, but it's just 1 page. They are not survival stories. You can survive by just washing up on a beach somewhere. These are stories anywhere from the Napoleonic Wars to the Gulf Wars, but they also include shipwrecks, plane wrecks, train wrecks, volcanoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, grizzly bear attacks. Guys, I don't know if you ever read about grizzly bear attacks. You talk about violence. On the order of violence, grizzly bear attacks rank just below a Baptist business meeting. But anyway, so these are just stories about people that chose to keep on going. They chose to fight on. Story on the back, it's about a guy in 1944. He was in a Sherman tank. They were watching a crossroads, and the Germans attacked. They hit that tank. It knocked the tank out and killed every guy in the tank but one guy. And rather than climb out and go running off, he stayed where he was. He loaded the main gun all by himself, aimed it at the Germans. He fired off every main gun round he had, 76 millimeter round he had. When there were no more main gun ammunition left, if you know anything about a tank, they got coaxial with the main gun is a 30 caliber machine gun. So he got over on that, and he swept back and forth across the field with that till he had no more 30 caliber ammunition. But up on top of the turret was a 50 cal. So he popped the hatch and he got behind that, blazed away at him till he's out of ammunition. But down in the tank, he had a Thompson submachine gun. So he got that, and he held them off while he could till he ran out of ammunition. Now all he had left was his Colt 1911 and 7 more opportunities to reach out and touch someone. And now there's not a bullet left in this tank. And he can't get out because the Germans are basically, they're just crawling all over this tank. He's buttoned up. They're trying to find a way to kill him, and lo and behold, he found a box of hand grenades. And he donated those to the German army that night, one by one. You say, what did he do? He chose to fight on. That's just what he did. He said, I'm going to keep on going. There's a story in here about a guy that was a mountain man, and a grizzly bear attacked him. And in fact, this grizzly bear popped out, and he shot it. And then while he's reloading, one came in behind him, and he shot it. By that time, the first one's back up. He just reloaded, shot it, but the second one got back up and got him. He said him and that bear rolled around, and he hit this bear with his weapon. Now, you remember the old muzzle loader? Bent the barrel. That is how he finished off this bear. But he was so tore up, it took him 4 days to crawl to his camp. Then he laid there and crawled to another camp where they took him for some medical treatment. You say, what did he do? He chose to fight on. So there's 2 of these. There's this one. There's a second volume. I think they're $25 a piece. We'll give them both to you for $60. I'm hoping you went to public school. Anyway, and speaking of money, this is called Money is a Defense. I don't know if you realize those 3 words, money or 4. Money is a defense. That is from the Bible. The Bible says money is a defense. You probably ought not to buy this book, because you'll find out that you can live within your income, and most folks don't want to do that, okay? But there's just some very good, sensible things you can do financially to take care of yourself. I talk to Christians all the time, and they're maxed out in credit cards, and they're looking for somebody to help them. This guy will help you. So that that is there. This one is this is a 24-hour King James seminar. In fact, the next one is in June. If you're interested, it's up in Bourbonnais, Illinois, about an hour south of Chicago. It is a 2-day seminar. It is 24 hours, 12 hours, 12 hours. We start at 8 o'clock in the morning on Thursday. We go to 8 o'clock at night on Thursday. Then Friday morning, we start at 8 o'clock in the morning. We go till 8 o'clock at night. When I teach a King James meeting, in a meeting like this, it's a Sunday through Wednesday. I give them something in Sunday school, and then morning and evening services are preaching. Then they get Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday. So you got about 4 hours of teaching. In this one, you get 32 different lessons. There's about 19 hours. We actually let them eat. I don't know why. But that is 24 hours. That comes with the seminar comes with a syllabus. This has, I think, a dozen DVDs. Yeah, 12 DVDs. It's got the 32 lessons. It's also got an MP3 that has the entire thing in audio. It also has another CD that has the syllabus that you can take it up and look at it and read it. So that's college stuff. And if you say, well, that's just more than I need, then there's one back here about 7 hours. It's just a little thing, but that is back there. And if you're interested in the King James seminar, I think you can sign up online. And then this is just a sermon. Back there on that table back there is a cardboard box with a bunch of, this is one just happened to be on Bible reading. I've been talking to you about the importance of Bible reading, and that's just a message on how to read your Bible, real simple on how to read the book. All right, I want you to open your Bibles to 2 Timothy chapter 2. 2 Timothy chapter 2. Now, I don't try to make saved people lost, okay? Somebody says they've trusted Christ their personal Savior. I figure they trusted Christ their personal Savior. And you guys know that's not really hard to do, is it? Salvation, one of the easiest things there is. It's so simple. God says all you have to have is a faith as a child. But I'm going to tell you something, guys. Too often, we kind of, like when a guy gets saved, somebody gets saved, they start getting in church, they kind of just, I call it ditto Christianity. You tell them anything else, oh yeah, I'm in there. Yeah, oh yeah, me too. Yeah, oh yeah, ditto, that's me. And I'm going to talk to you tonight about a passage of Scripture that says this. Look at verse 1. 2 Timothy chapter 1, it says this. Thou therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same commit thou to faithful men, who shall be able to teach others also. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Let's bow our heads and let's talk to the Lord. Father, I thank you now, God, for your goodness. And I thank you for your grace. And I thank you for your very great, great kindness. Lord God, you are good to us day and night. You are always good. In fact, Lord, we could talk all day, all of us, we could talk all day about the good in our lives that you have brought, that we recognize. It's going to embarrass us when we get to the other side and see all the things you did for us that we just kind of took for granted. But Lord, we want to bless you. We want to please you. We want to put a smile on your face and be a pleasure to you. God, these folks came to church tonight. There's something they're usually doing on Tuesday night. But they all said they'd rather be in church. And so here they are. God, I pray that you will get Sam Gipp out of your way and out of their way and speak to the heart of each individual here and accomplish your purpose in each life. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Verse 3 says this, Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. Guys, there is something to being a soldier. Do you understand that? And I take an issue with people who just, I remember I talking to you about pew warmer. Somebody just kind of, their whole thing in life is warming up this much foam on a pew. You say, well, they're saved. Yeah, they're saved. Trusted Christ, they're saved. And then they go, oh, I'm a soldier too. Well, I'm not sure about that. Okay? I'm just not sure. It's just kind of like, well, why can't I be everything? Well, you can be everything, but it's not like you just got it all in a bag when you got saved. And so I am not going to tell you that you are a soldier, and I'm not going to tell you that you are not a soldier. What I am going to do is I'm going to ask you some questions that you should have the answer for if you are a soldier. All right? The first question is this. If you are a soldier for Jesus Christ, when did you join? When did you join the army for the Lord? Look, talk to anybody that's in uniform and ask them, say, when did you join? You think the answer is going to be, oh, I've just always had this uniform. Yeah, I've been wearing this since I was in the nursery. I've just always been a soldier. Nobody's always been a soldier. Do you understand? Every guy that's in there now, you know what they will remember? They will remember there was a time when they signed up. There was a time when they were sworn in. There was a time when they joined, which means there was a time when they were not in. Isn't that true? So guys, what I'm telling you is that if you say, well, I'm a soldier for Christ, then tell me when you got. Wait, don't tell me. Tell yourself. When did you join? When did you say to the Lord, I'm in? Because I don't know that everybody's ever done that. I was not in the military. I'll tell you what happened. Before I got saved, I was not good. I know it's hard to believe. But I was a Roman Catholic. I was a drunk. I was a thief. I was a Democrat. Just all those ungodly things. And I stole my first car when I was 14 years old, spent my first night in jail when I was 14 years old. When I was 16 years old, 4 friends of mine and I, we went up to the Mercury dealer. We hot-wired 2 Comet Cyclone GT 394 speeds and tore those cars up. Well, I got arrested for 2 cases of grand theft auto. I was sentenced to Mansfield Reformatory. If you want to know what Mansfield Reformatory looks like, there is a movie out there called The Shawshank Redemption, and that's not a prison. That's Mansfield Reformatory. They closed it down. But it's an ominous place. I didn't have to go. I just didn't have to go. But I ended up I was 17 years old when that happened. And so I was facing that. That was ahead of me. I was on probation. If I messed up, I was headed for Mansfield. And so here I was, 17 years old. I'm on probation. My probation officer said, I am going to get you. He said, I will catch you jaywalking, but I'm going to get you, and you're going to Mansfield. Well, I didn't jaywalk, but I got drunk, and I wrecked my car. And so I told my doctor, you know, he said, what happened? I said, well, I was just driving, I passed out. Well, you do that when you're drunk. I just forgot to tell him about that part. And so he did a brain wave. And first off, yes, he found a brain. But here's the thing, guys. If you just do this on your forehead and take a brain wave, your brain waves will be scattered for the next 60 days. You can't take any kind of a blow to the head and then have a brainwave. And the doctor that did this brainwave, who incidentally was the same doctor some years later, overlooked my broken neck, he said that I was a petit mal epileptic. Now, I knew I wasn't. You say, well, why didn't you tell him? Because it kept me out of prison, that's why. But, and then I turned 18. Now, when I turned 18, the country was just going from the draft to the lottery system. And they broke everybody up, every 18-year-old. They put them in 3 groups. And if you're in the first group, you're going in the military. If you're in the second group, you're probably going to the military. And if you're in the third group, don't even worry about it. I was in the second group. So I said, okay, I'm going to end up in the military. They're going to draft me. And some of the guys in that second group got drafted, and some of them didn't. I was one of the guys that did not. So now I'm 19, and I got in a fight with a guy in a bar over the Vietnam War. He was against it. I was for it. He was for the commies. I was not. But it made me mad, and it made me mad because I thought those guys are over there dying and I'm over here. So the next day, I went to the Marine recruiter, and I said this. I said, I want to join the Marines. I said, I want you to send me to Vietnam. I mean, all I wanted to do was go over there and kill people. So that's not a very noble cause. Well, I guess when you're in the military, it's a pretty noble cause. And it's not like this kid. You remember this first Gulf War? That first Gulf War they had? I couldn't get over it. They're interviewing this 19-year-old kid in the Army, and he said this. He goes, I didn't join the Army to fight. I just wanted to get my college paid for. And I thought, well, if you live through the war, you're going to get your college paid for. See, isn't that nice? Guys, you don't join the Army so you get your college paid for. You join the Army so you can fight for this country. And so I walked in, this Marine recruiter, you know, of course, he's glad somebody actually wanted to join, and he signed me up. And then he looked at my draft card. Now, 1A means you're clear. 4F means you can't get in. I was neither. I was 1Y. 1Y was you can only go in if in a declared war or a national emergency. And this guy's all happy. He looks at me and he goes, I can't enlist you. I said, why not? He said, well, your draft card says you're 1Y because of this so-called medical condition. He said, draft card says you're 1Y. And he said, I can only take you in in a declared war or a national emergency, and Vietnam is not a declared war, and it's not been called a national emergency. I can't take you in. Guys, I never got in the Marines, okay? So what are you saying that for? Because I run into guys, you know, that have been in Marines. I admire anybody that's been in the military. But I never say, well, you know, I tried to join. You know what that means? Nothing. That's what it means. I had a friend. They bought me a letter opener that was a miniature M1 bayonet. Neatest letter opener. I liked it, and it worked good. It was a replica of an M1 bayonet, but I got rid of it. You know why I got rid of it? Because they gave it to me. Before they gave it to me, they took it to an engraver, and they had engraved on the blade, United States Marine Corps. And they handed this to me, and they said, you remind me of a Marine, so I'm giving this to you. And every time I'd look at that bayonet, you know what I'd think? I wasn't a Marine. I got no business having this. I had a pastor friend. He was in the Marines. I took that thing to him. I said, brother, I am giving this to you. He said, why? I said, because it says United States Marine Corps. I was never in the Marines. You were in the Marines. This belongs to you. It doesn't belong to me. Guys, you say, why are you doing that? Because I never joined. You understand? I can even remember the day that I went in and tried to join. I'm telling you, I was never in. What I'm telling you is if you're in the Army for the Lord, you ought to remember the day you got in, shouldn't you? I have a good friend. In fact, he wrote the introduction for that Fight On book. He's a lieutenant colonel in Green Berets. He was in Vietnam, and he likes me, believe it or not. He said, I want to write the introduction for your book. And he gave me a baseball hat one time, and right on in front of it says combat infantryman. He was a combat infantryman. And he gave me this baseball hat, and he said, he gave it to me because it said combat infantryman. Guys, that hat never got on my head. I never put that hat on my head. Could you imagine me walking down the street with something that said combat infantryman, and I've not even been in the military? If I put that hat on my head, it was an insult to anybody that's ever been in the military. I don't care if all they did is operate a typewriter. If you're here and you're in the military, and all you did, you say, well, I was only a clerk. You have done more in the military for this country than I have. What I'm telling you guys is, I never got in. I'm not trying to get credit for having got in. I'm just telling you I tried to get in. I couldn't get in. I've never been in. So I don't walk around saying, oh yeah, I'm in. I was in. I wasn't in. But I take offense because I'll tell you what. You know what June 17th, 1971 was? That's the day I got in. You say got in what? I got in the Lord's army. That's the day when I was in Bible college, guys, and they had a revival meeting, and that night God called me to preach. I joined up that night. What I'm telling you is I can remember when I didn't get in the military. I can remember when I did get in the Lord's army. I can remember when I joined. Now if you say, well, I'm in the Lord's army, then when did you get in? You ought to be able to, you have to tell me. You ought to be able to sit there right now and go, I remember the time I did it. I remember when I told the Lord I want in. If you can't remember it, I got bad news for you. You are probably not in the Lord's army. And who likes these guys that play cops and robbers? You know, they run around with their khakis on and wear somebody else's medal. Boy, you don't want to do that and have a guy that's really in catch you, because he'll just ruin your day. So all I'm asking you, if you say, oh, I'm a soldier for the Lord, okay, when did you get in? Let me ask you this. If you are a soldier, who's your enemy? Don't you think a soldier ought to know who the enemy is? I mean, guys, when our guys in World War II, they knew who the Japanese were. Those were the enemy. The Germans were the enemy. Today, they know that the Muslims and the Democrats are the enemy. But our military, the guys in the military, they know who the enemy is, don't they? Okay, so who's your enemy? You know what I hate to say? I hate to say this, but most Christians' enemy is another Christian. Which, think about this. If a Christian is your enemy, whose army are you in? You know, when that first Gulf War started, there was a Muslim in our army. He had joined. He was a sergeant. He walked up to a bunch of his fellow soldiers, pulled the pin on a hand grenade, and threw it in there, killed 2, wounded 11. He was wearing an American Army uniform because he was a member of the American Army. But he was loyal to the Muslims. I think they ought to hang him. I think they ought to hang him. That's treason. That's treachery. I don't trade him for anybody. Just hang him from a tree somewhere. But guys, what I'm telling you is, he knew who his enemy was. And we knew who, in our military, we're supposed to know who the enemy is, are we not? So who are you out to get? Let me ask you a question about who the enemy is. Who do you want to hurt? He said, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody. Really? Okay, I want you to take that phrase. Here's where you are. You're in the Marines, or you're in the Army. It is June 6, 1944, and you're in a landing craft headed for the Normandy beach, and you look at the guy next to you and go, well, are you ready? And the guy beside you goes, I don't know. I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want that guy next to me. Right? I'm sorry, guys, but in the military, you ought to want to hurt people. The right people. Who do you want to hurt? I knew a young pastor. An older man in his church got mad at him, saved man, got mad at him, left the church, and then did what any good church member that leaves would do, started bad-mouthing the pastor all over town. I mean, he's saying terrible things about him. And one day the pastor saw him in a store, and he said, hey, I got to ask you something. He goes, yeah. He said, I was talking to somebody, and they said that you told them I did this. He goes, yeah, I told them that. He said, but that never happened. He said, I mean, that's not even like something that it's like your view and my view, you know, or you misunderstood something. He said, nothing like that ever happened. He said, that was a lie. Guy goes, yeah, it sure was. And he said, if you think that's something, wait till you see what I tell him next. You know who that guy was? His father. That was the pastor's father. Say, who would do that? Hey, you know what the unpardonable sin is? You know what the sin unto death is? To disagree with me. I don't mean to disagree with Sam Gipp. All Christians believe you disagree with me, and I got a right to destroy you. Now, you know most Christians are happy if they've caused grief to another Christian. You give a Christian one bullet, and if there is in one room, there's 2 people, he gets to shoot one of them. and one of them is the devil, and the other one is a Christian he's mad at, I'll guarantee you the Christian will shoot the Christian every time. So all I'm asking you tonight is, who are you trying to hurt? You know, if you thought you did something and it messed up the devil's plan, I hope that make you happy. But is that even part of your plan? If you're in the army, who are you trying to hurt? What are you doing to hurt him? Don't sit there and say, you say, well, I want something bad to happen to the devil. Well, I want something bad to happen to the Muslims over there in Afghanistan, but I'm not over there doing it. Me wanting something bad to happen to ISIS, that's me wanting that. That doesn't mean I'm in the army because I want the same thing the guy in the army wants. You understand? So you sit there and go, well, I want something bad to happen to the devil. That's not what I asked you. I said, what are you doing? What are you doing to ruin him? What are you doing to hurt his cause? How are you trying to hurt your enemy? And I'm telling you guys, most of the times when we hurt somebody, we do it with the telephone, and it's a fellow Christian that we're hurting. So whose army are you in? Who is your enemy? Who do you want to upset? Your pastor and I, we've been talking. You know, I got these those videos on the internet, and they're about the King James Bible. And after every time I make one, poor James White comes crawling out of his basement, and he has to come up and say why I was wrong. I'm going to give you a very simplistic thought. Okay, I am going to boil down what a King James Bible believer believes, and I'm going to put it in one sentence. You say, oh, no, preacher, we believe, it's the right manuscripts. We believe it's the right guys translating it. We believe, No, I'm going to tell you what we believe. Now, tell me if I'm wrong. Here's what we believe. We believe that God was powerful enough to inspire the Bible perfect in the original and also powerful enough to preserve it to today. Now, isn't that really what we believe? Okay, now think about that. Your pastor gets up here and he says what I just said. And when he gets done saying it, James White comes running out going, no, he didn't. No, he isn't. No, he isn't. Right? I mean, if you think about the people that don't like the King James Bible, we're saying God had enough power to write a book and preserve it, and they're trying to tell you God did not. That's how it all comes down to. And so every time I do a video, I put the word out. I say, tell James White that we found the parachute that the King James Bible came out of heaven on. We got one next month. Next month, we're doing the 7th one. It's the last one. And I said, somebody tell James White, we found the body of the Apostle Paul, and yes, he did indeed have a King James Bible in his hand. Apparently, it was good enough for the Apostle Paul. You say, why are you doing that? Oh, because I'm just upsetting him. It just bothers him. And I'll get it done. And, man, the last one, it took him 6 months to answer it. I thought, my goodness, brother. Well, all I'm asking you is, who are you trying to upset? Oh, well, I don't want to upset anybody. Well, you must be a woman. Women don't like to have any kind of confrontation. Guys, come on, we're supposed to be a little bit different. Are you not supposed to be an effeminate man? Well, I just don't want to offend somebody. Do you ever have that attitude when you're out in a football field? Well, like I told you, we don't want to hit him too hard. We don't want to win because we'll offend them. Oh, let's offend them. There are some people you just need to offend. They need to be offended. Well, liberals wake up every morning saying, please offend me somehow. Do something to make them happy, would you? Guys, if you are in the Lord's army, who is your enemy? Let me ask you this. If you're in the Lord's army, who are you supporting? Who are you helping? I told you I like to come into a church. I like to see some kind of a mission board because you're supporting those missions, right? You know that you got missionaries you're supporting in countries that you'll never step foot in. You know what you ought to do? You ought to be sending them something. I don't know if you believe in this. I'll tell you, and I believe in tithing. But above that, I believe in giving. And somebody came up with this term. I don't know who it was, but it's one of the greatest terms we ever came up with. It's called the designated offering. That ranks right up there with the Chinese buffet when it comes to good ideas, okay? That was just a good idea. What that is that's where I give you the money and I get to tell you how to spend it. I like that. You know what I wish we had in this country? Designated taxes. I don't mind paying my taxes. I really don't. But I wish there was a box that said, okay, Gipp, here's how much you owe this year. And then there's like about a dozen little things said, how do you want to spend this money? Step one, box one. I want my tax money to go to a bunch of people that are too lazy to work. I want you to buy them groceries. Ooh, we'd pass that box up real fast. somewhere in there'd be one that says this: I want all my tax money to buy bullets and bombs for the military. Oh, I wish there was a check mark for that on my income tax. I'd probably be willing to pay more than I owe. You say, why? Because it'd just be nice to know that I'm buying their ammunition. I don't know if I said this or not the other day, guys. I was talking to you about gospel tracts. I personally believe no church should buy gospel tracts. I don't think this church should ever buy a gospel tract. So I thought you said you believe in gospel tracts. I do. I thought you said the church ought to have a tract rack. I did, and I do. I said the church should never have to buy the tracts to fill it. There ought to be somebody who wants to put their money, not their tithe, but an offering to good use, that come up and say, preacher, next time you want to order some tracts, don't write out a church check. I'll pay for them. Who are you supporting? Who are you helping? Did you know this? You say that guys are airborne. And you know the standard joke, what kind of a nut would jump out of a perfectly good plane? Got to be a crazy guy. No, you know what's crazy? He jumps out of that perfectly good airplane with a parachute that he didn't even pack. That's a man of faith. Now you think about that. I mean, if I'm going to jump out of this airplane, special forces, they pack their own chutes. But the everyday 101st Airborne, when those guys jump out of an airplane, they did not pack that chute. Boy, you better hope that guy that's packing that chute knows what he's doing. Don't you think? Do you understand that here's a guy that's going into combat and he needs to get there in a Hummer, and there's got to be somebody to keep that thing running? I don't care if that guy is the mechanic for the Army. I don't care if he never sees combat. He is supporting somebody. I have heard this. I've heard it said that in our military, you just take any 10, 1 out of 10 is in combat. You know what that means? That means there are 9 people for every combat infantryman, everybody that faces the enemy. There's 9 guys that never see the enemy. And some used to, whoa. Are you telling me the guy ought to come out of combat and then come back and cook his own meals? You're telling me he ought to be in combat and then fix the Hummer too? You're telling me he's going to come out of combat and he's been wounded and he ought to operate on himself? I'm not telling you. You know one of the things we do? We get this thing where everybody has got to be a frontline combat soldier. I don't believe that. I really don't. I was talking to a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps a few years ago. I'm going to try to get this right. I wasn't in the military, but I think it's second lieutenant, captain, major, lieutenant colonel, brigadier general. Let's see, major general, lieutenant general, and then a 4-star. So that's the generals are 1, 2, 3, 4 stars. And I asked this guy, because here's what you've heard. Did you ever hear anybody say this? Well, you know, if our officers led from the front. Don't you ever say that. Our officers lead from the front. American officers, the highest casualty in our military are the lieutenants, second lieutenants, even captains, because they lead from the front. You say, well, the generals don't. Well, let me clue you in on that, okay? I asked this lieutenant colonel, I said, you start out as a second lieutenant and you're in combat, right? Yep. And I said, so you go on, but I said, as you go up in rank, there has to be a point at which you no longer lead troops into combat. I said, what is the highest rank that you can have that you would still be leading troops into combat? I was surprised. He said, colonel. That's a full bird colonel. He says a full bird colonel will lead a company into combat. You say, well, why doesn't a general? How do you lead 30,000 men into combat? You can't lead 30,000 men into combat. If we get this thing down of, well, everybody's got to go knocking on doors. Everybody doesn't have to knock on doors. But if you're not going to knock on doors, you ought to buy somebody a tank of gas that goes and knocks on doors. Well, why would I do that? Because you ought to be supporting somebody that's in the military doing something you don't want to have to do. You guys remember during the first Gulf War, do you remember Norman Schwarzkopf? The guy was a military genius. And I don't know if you saw him. And I say this, there's no disrespect, but I am not sure that General Norman Schwarzkopf could have gotten through Army basic training. He was overweight. He was overweight. I don't know if he was out of shape, but he was overweight. And you say, well, no, hold on. He was doing a press conference, whatever they called it, you know. And some smart-mouth news journalist, young guy, he asked him some kind of a question trying to embarrass him, and Schwarzkopf cut him off. And he said, you ever been in a minefield? And the kid started talking over him. And he said, I said, have you ever been in a minefield? And he shut the guy down. You know why he said that? Because he'd been in a minefield. When he was in Vietnam, I believe it was when he was a captain in the Army, coming up in rank, still leading men into combat. And his men walked into a minefield. A guy walked in a mine, got injured. 2 or 3 of them hit mines. I think maybe one of them got killed. He told every one of his men to freeze. He walked in that minefield, led every guy out, and the ones that were too wounded to walk out, he put them on his back and carried them out through a minefield. Now you're going to tell me when he's a general that he should be going back into the minefield? Because I got news for you. He was the one that came up with the left hook that beat Saddam Hussein's army. And what I'm telling you is that there comes a point where you just get to where you don't do the everyday combat. So I'm asking you, if you're in the Army, I'm not asking you, who did you kill? I'm not telling you got to go knock on doors and fight with Jehovah's Witnesses and Pentecostals or anything else. But if you're not, who are you helping? You ought to be helping somebody. You ought to grab a hold of somebody that's in combat for the Lord and do something. Man, write a missionary letter and say, I'm sure glad you're out in the field. I'm sure glad for what you're doing. I mean, guys, what are you doing to support your troops? I'm not telling you got to be in a foxhole somewhere. I'm asking you, who are you supporting? Let me ask you this. If you're in the military. If you get a guy in the military, ask him this. What's your MOS? That's military operation specialty, I think. I don't even know what it is. I wasn't in the military. But they say this. They have a theater of operation. Okay? Right now our military, we have some guys, they're in Europe. That's their theater of operation. Some of the guys are in Korea, theater of operation. Some guys are in Afghanistan. That's their theater of operation. Let me ask you something. What's your theater of operation? If you're in the Lord's army, what field are you working in? Jack Chick, I was mentioning to you the other day, yesterday, he turned 91. Jack Chick was in the Army in World War II, and he was in New Guinea. And his area, his MOS, he was in cryptology. That's what he did. What I'm saying is that's what his job was, okay? So, what's your theory of operation? What's your theater of operation? You know, I held that book up the other day about this verse supposedly contradicting the other verse. You remember that? I have people come up to me and they'll say, hey, I got this verse here and it's supposed to contradict this verse. They say, what should I do about it? And I said, I don't know. And they look at me like, well, why don't you know? Hey, guys, I am not here to know everything. Nobody can. You know, you don't go to college and have 2 majors. You have a major and minor. You know what my area of operation is? It's not supposed contradictions in the Bible. Mine is Bible, Greek Bible manuscripts, and the history of the King James Bible. That's it. And if it's outside that, I let somebody else take care of it. You know what I would love? I would love my ministry to also be about disproving evolution. Man, I love that. But that is an entire different study. Guys, for 40 years, I have been studying this subject. You understand? You know what I've had to do? Do you know what is drier? I'm talking about reading. Do you know what's drier reading than a British author? But guys, I love the Brits. But those guys can put you to sleep reporting on a house fire. I say, it's on fire. I said, give that microphone to an American, man. We'll make a movie. That American to go, oh, the flames are leaping into the air, babies are crying, women are passing out. Oh, that's horrible. I mean, that's what we'll do, okay? Do you know what is drier than a British author? Oh, there's something drier. A century-old British author. You said, like what? Like the life and letters of Brooke Foss Westcott. It's 2 volumes. It's 1,000 pages. I've read it. The Life and Letters of Fenton John Anthony Hort. It's 2 volumes, over 1,000 pages. I've read it. 1871, I can't remember what the other one is. It was right around 1800. Not long ago, I had to read another one, 2 volumes, over 1,000 pages on Greek manuscripts. It was written in 1870, and I was the first person that ever read the book. I know for a fact this book, it was printed in 1870, and nobody had ever read it till I got it. You say, how do you know? If you know anything about printing, they print octavo, they fold it over, fold it over, fold it over, they print 8 pages, and then they bind it, and the pages come out, and and they're folded over and they go back in. You can't open them. Then they trim it, and that's when they cut that paper off. This book, they missed the pages when they trimmed it. There's all kinds of pages that came out and folded over and went back in. You couldn't open the page. I'd take my pocket knife and split it. When I read it, I thought, why did I do that? What I'm saying, guys, I've studied this subject for 40 years. You know why I don't mess with evolution and anti-evolution stuff? Because I need another 40 years to study that. So I hope somebody else takes care of that. But I know where I work. You understand? So all I'm asking you is, what's your field of operation? What do you do? Please, tell me something. Tell me you do something. I don't care. Listen, I don't care if you're a clerk. I don't care if you're a cook. But I'm telling you, be something for the Lord Jesus Christ. If you want in the army, get in the army and say, here's what I'm going to do for God. But do something. I'm not going to call you a coward if you say, I want to get in the Lord's army, but I don't want to knock on a door. Then find some way you can support somebody that's knocking on doors and find something you can do for God. Do something. You ought to have some area to say, this is mine. This is what I do right here. This is what I do. Let me ask you this. What's your military objective? You know, a military's got to have an objective. You know, one of the reasons we are losing in this war on terror is because we have no objective. But you need to have an objective. That objective is, there's what I'm trying to go after, right there. Guys, I have two objectives. You say, well, you ought to have more than that. Can't take me my whole life on these two. Just on these two. I want people to worship God. And I want people using the right Bible. That's my objective. I have two objectives. That is what I want. And I am spending like money. I am spending my life trying to obtain those objectives. I am trying to get people to use the right Bible. I got an email today, and this pastor in Philadelphia said, I was talking to a guy. He said the guy's never met you, never heard you preach, but he said he picked up a book of yours, and he said he read about 2 of your books, and he said ever since then he's been using the King James Bible. I had a guy contacting me today on the internet, and he said, I've been watching your videos on the internet, and he said, I am now King James only. About a month or two ago, I got an email that the head of the Presbyterian churches in Canada got converted to the King James Bible watching our online King James videos. You say, what do you tell me? I'm telling you, that's what I'm going for. That's what I want. That's what I'm shooting for. Okay? So what's your objective? You know what I feel bad about most preachers or most Christians? Their objective is splitting a church or hurting a pastor. That's their objective. Their goal is to hurt a fellow Christian. Their goal is to destroy a church. Guys, that's not a godly goal. You remember I told you the other day I learned some spiritual lessons before I got saved? I'm going to give you another spiritual lesson I learned before I got saved. When I was learning this lesson, I did not know it was spiritual until after I got saved. Here's what I did. And even though I was lost, I was a drunk, and I was a street fighter and everything, I've always been news oriented, always checking up on the news. I always want to find out what's going on. And so I'm like 18, 19 years old. And in 1968 and 69 in this country, there's a bunch of hippies, and they're burning Bank of America buildings. And so I'm watching the news, and here out in California, these hippies burned about 2 or 3 Bank of America buildings. Now, let me explain what that is. A crime. It's called arson, and you go to prison for it, right? They interviewed a hippie. Now, guys, when you set fire to a building and you get interviewed instead of arrested, the country's turned a turn it ought not to turn. And they interviewed this hippie, and they said, why are you burning these Bank of America buildings? He said, oh, he sounded so noble. He sounded like a Christian. He said this, he said, we're going to build a new country, but we've got to burn the old one down first. Okay, I am going to pose a question to every one of you. I want you to think about the answer to this, because I haven't found this person yet. Has anybody here, any of you, ever seen a building that a hippie built? Now, if I did see one, I'm not sure I'd go in. But I've never seen a building that hippie built. Have you? Well, they said they're going to build a new country, but they had to burn the old one down first. You know what I learned? I learned this. Any hippie can burn a building. It doesn't take a lot of talent to burn a building, does it? You could bring a little 6-year-old child. You could bring a 5-year-old child in this room, in this building, give them a pack of matches, and couldn't that child turn this building into a burned out, smoldering hulk by this time tomorrow? Another question. Could that same child build this building? Then you know what I learned? Building is the tough part. You guys have no idea what this pastor here, you have no idea what went through his heart, how hard it was on his life to build this church. Now you have another pastor. You have no idea. And I'm not talking about, not either one of these men have come to me and said, let me tell you how hard it is. No. They haven't said a thing bad about this church. They haven't said it's been tough. What I'm telling you is I know what it takes. You know what it's like? You know they don't join 25 at a time, but they leave 25 at a time because somebody gets mad and they take everybody out that they can. And then somebody says, well, I reached my objective. Oh, splitting a church? Let me ask you a question. If you ever split a church, if you ever destroyed somebody's ministry or tried to ruin somebody's reputation or got two brethren who could no longer fellowship because of your wonderful inference into their fellowship, you really think when you stand in front of Jesus Christ and he said, did you love me? You're going to say, how could you question if I loved you? How could, look at I split that church for you. I got that guy out of the ministry for you. I got those two guys so that they wouldn't talk to each other anymore. I got that guy right there run out of town. How could you question my love? Look at all the blood on my hands. Look at the smoldering ruins behind me. You know what I don't want to be? I'll tell you what I don't want to be. If I can't be God's soldier, I sure don't want to be his hippie. I don't want to be somebody that every time you ask me if I've achieved something, I have to point at what I destroyed. Because do you know what the devil's called in the Bible? The destroyer. So if you're a destroyer, whose army are you in? So I'm asking you guys, all I'm asking is if you're in the military, what's your objective? What are you trying to achieve? You say, well, I don't know what I'm trying to achieve. Okay, let me ask you this. Have you ever come into this church on a Sunday and seen an empty spot in a pew? Okay, how's that for a goal? No, don't make more empty spots. What if your goal was, I'm going to see to it we fill them up? Oh, preacher, that's awful hard. Oh yeah, splitting them's a whole lot easier. Running people out of a church is a whole lot easier. What I'm asking you, what is your objective? Let me ask you this. If you're in the military, what has your service cost you? You join, a guy joins in, a guy joins the military, I don't care if he's in for 4 years or 30 years, he loses something in the civilian world. You know one of the saddest things? One of the saddest things is when a guy comes out of the military and he's been like a colonel or a general, and he takes a secular job, and those guys don't even realize what it cost him. They don't understand what this guy went through to be what he was in the Army or the military. You know, I was talking to a guy some time ago, and I said, I knew they said somebody being in the military. I said, what were you in? He goes, the Army. I said, what was your rank? He said, I was Sergeant Major. I said, what? He said, I was Sergeant Major. You know what Sergeant Major is? Let me just put it this way. A Sergeant Major in the Army, you have two groups in every military. You have the enlisted ranks and the officer ranks, okay? In enlisted, you got private and corporal and sergeant and any number of sergeants. But you don't go much beyond sergeant. And then over here you start out, the lieutenant, second lieutenant is like a private over here. Sergeant Major, that is the 4-star general of enlisted ranks. I said, brother, how long are you in? He said, I was in 27 years. I said, Sergeant Major is not an easy thing to come by. I said, that's an amazing thing that you did. All right, so here's what I'm asking. But it cost him something. You understand? Maybe he had some other goal in his life. Maybe you've seen them. They come home with no leg. They come home with no arm. They come home, they don't think right anymore. What I'm asking you is, what has your service cost you? You know, I like cars. I told you I'm not a hunter. I'm not a fisherman. I'm a painter. I paint anything. I paint houses. I paint cars. I paint anything. I like to paint, but I like working on cars. When I got saved, I was working in a two-man body shop. It was me and the owner. And that's all I ever wanted. Well, you know what I wanted? My goal in life before I got saved was to have my own body shop. I wanted to get my own body shop, but I wasn't going to keep a body shop. I wanted to turn it into a custom paint shop. I began doing custom paint work. I was doing candy apples and metal flakes, and I was starting to study custom paints, and that's when I got saved. And so when I got saved, I had to leave that job. 10 weeks after I got saved, I left Ohio, went down to Pensacola, Florida to go to Bible college. I came back at the end of my first year, and I went back to work at that body shop. Found out that my boss was saved, just never told me. And so I worked all summer between my first and second year of Bible college in the shop that I was working in before I got saved. Now the summer's over, I've got to go down for my second year of school. And I said, his name was Rodney, and I said, Rod, I said, going back down to Bible college, I said, tell you what, I'll come back up next year and I'll work for you again next summer. He said, no, you won't. I said, why not? He said, I'm selling the whole place and moving to Texas. The whole place, piece of ground, 3-bedroom house, garage, about $15,000 worth of mechanics and body tools. I mean wrenches, grinders, compressors, torches, welders, paint guns. I mean mechanical tools and body shop tools. Even the name. He was even going to leave the name. His name was well known. He said, I'm selling the whole place, moving to Texas. I said, really? I said, who are you selling it to? He said, I'm selling it to you for $7,000. Huh. You say, brother, that was a steal. You don't understand. Yeah, it was a steal, but it was more than that. It was all I ever wanted. It is the only thing in my life I ever wanted. And there it is. I am $7,000 away from probably $25,000 worth of equipment, totaled everything, probably $50,000 investment in the whole thing, and I'm going to get it for $7,000. So what'd you do? It took me about 5 seconds to say this. No, Rod, not me. God's called me to preach. You say, well, isn't it noble? Oh, don't give me this, if you've been called to preach, don't stoop to be a king. I am telling you that there are men who God called to preach, and if they would have kept their day job and never answered the call, they'd be making more money today without the ulcer and without all those people that hate him. Yeah, that's the truth. Guys, what has your service cost you? Come on, it's got to cost you something. Please tell me, if you're in the military, it has got to cost you something. It has got to upset your regular schedule somewhere. You know, I was telling your pastor, I finish up here tonight. We're going to leave tomorrow night because I miscalculated. I finish here on Wednesday. I start in the other end of Tennessee on Thursday for a Thursday through Sunday. I can drive 250 miles and preach that night. If I drive 300 miles in a day and preach that night, I'm pretty much wiped out. But I didn't realize that we're over 400 miles away. We're going to leave tomorrow night. We'll probably drive 200 miles tomorrow, 200 miles the next day, and then I'll start a Thursday through Sunday. Guys, we're always tired. We're always tired. You say, oh, are you whining? No, man. Came with the territory. I got no problem with it. But it's got to cost you something, doesn't it? That lady like a house. I'd like a house. I really would. I didn't care about a house when I first went on the road, but I'd kind of like one now. All I'm asking you, I'm not telling you to go buy a motor home and run all over the country. What I'm asking you is, what has your service for the Lord cost you? You have got to show me it cost you something. You know what? Let me just give you an example. You're sitting here tonight on a Tuesday night, and I prayed it. I believe this. This is not a church night, which means every single person in this room, not me, I'm usually preaching on a Tuesday night, but every other person in this room, there's something you're usually doing at 7 o'clock on Tuesday night. Probably somewhere in the sentence says the 2 letters TV, whatever. There's something you're usually doing on Tuesday night at 7 o'clock. Not doing that is what it costs you to be here tonight. I didn't say that puts you in the Army. I didn't say that makes you a soldier. I said at least doing something for the Lord costs you something. You understand? So I'm asking you, if you're in the Army, where has it changed your plans? Where has it drawn on you? One other question. You still active? You still active? You know, there's 2 kinds of guys, and this is no, sometimes some guys take an offense at this, and I don't mean it in a bad way. There's guys that go in for one tour. They go in for about 4 years in the military, and they serve their time, and they're done. And then there's guys, they're called lifers, and they go in and they just stay there the rest of their life. Man, they eat, drink, and sleep the military. That's just their thing. I'm a lifer. You know, I heard a statistic. You know what the interesting statistic, what it was? Those numbers, those figures? Statistic. They said that the average active life of a Christian, now I'm talking about over all the time they're in church, that they're really active for the Lord, only averages out to be about 4 or 5 years. And I had a pastor tell me that, and he couldn't understand why people do that. I said, can't you figure it out? He said, no. I said, that's about one hitch in the military. 4 years in the military, and you can get out. And most Christians, their active life. I didn't say how many years they go to church. I said how many years they're active for the Lord. Over 20 years, they might be active for a year and then just sit there and watch the world go by and then do something for about 6 months. And they end up in 20 years having really worked for God about 4 years of that 20 years. Because that's one hitch. You got in and you got out. You know what I am? You know what he is? You know what he is? Lifer. We jumped in with both feet that deep. But here's my question. You know what I'm talking? I am talking to somebody, maybe there was a day when you knocked on doors. Maybe there was a day, your pastor mentioned, I think Saturday you had visitation. Maybe I'm talking to somebody, you can say, oh yeah, I remember, I used to go to visitation on Saturday. So what happened? You're not active anymore? What did you do? You say you're in the military, but you're not. Are you AWOL? Did the Lord call you to duty and you just decided not to answer? Did you say, I'm not going to do that? All I'm asking you is, are you still active? I heard about this 86-year-old pastor. Preacher, you'll love this guy. He was 86 years old. His health was pretty much gone. His back was pretty bad. And a young man came in and took over his church. And the pastor emeritus stayed there. And they were having a work day. He said, young pastor said, Saturday's work day. And so he got a bunch of guys came. And here came this old pastor. And he had these bib overalls, and he had a hammer. And I mean, this guy, if he picked up that hammer and swung it, he'd probably break his arm. And the young pastor, pastor, he goes, we don't need you up on a ladder. We don't need you to try to carry up anything. He said, you don't have to be here. He goes, well, I can't do much. But he said, I just thought people need to know where I stand. He said, I just want to be here because I ought to be here. He said, I don't care he didn't care if he did anything. Don't get me wrong. He just said, I'm part of this. And they just need to know that I'm still active. Maybe he can't maybe he can't do the roofing, he can't climb the ladder. Maybe he can't do all the things he used to. He says, I want to let you know, I'm still active. You know what Uncle Bud Robinson was a great Nazarene preacher. He said, I want to fight the devil as long as I got strength. And he said, when I don't have the strength to fight him anymore, he said, I'm going to bite him. And he said, I'm going to bite him until I lose my teeth. Then I'm going to gum him to death. I appreciate that. I appreciate somebody just says, I'm going to be active. I'm going to go as long as I can go. I'm going to go till I can't go no more. And you know what happened? Somebody upset you. You got involved with something else, and it picked up your time, and it picked up your money, and it picked up your heart, and it picked up your interest, and now you're not active anymore. Look at the verse. Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. I'm not asking you tonight if you're a good soldier. I'm asking you, are you a soldier? Because if you are, you ought to know when you got in. I'd like you to stand with your heads bowed. If you're a soldier for the Lord, in just a moment, I'm going to have a word of prayer. Turn this over to your pastor. Before I pray, I want you to review some things. As you stand there with your heads bowed and your eyes closed, if you're a soldier for the Lord, answer this to yourself. You don't owe me an answer. Don't you come up and tell me. You don't owe me nothing. But you owe yourself one. You owe God an answer. If you're a soldier, can you remember when you joined? I'll bet your pastor can remember. I'll bet he can remember when he joined. I'll bet Brother Tom founded this church. I'll bet he can remember when he joined. Can you remember when you joined? If you're a soldier, who's your enemy? Who are you trying to hurt? I hope it's not another Christian. Who are you supporting? What's your theater of operation? What is your military objective? What does your service cost you? And are you still active? Maybe somebody tonight needs to join. Maybe somebody needs to re-up. Maybe you need to say, I've been sitting out too long. You know what you find out in the military? You find out that a lot of guys in the military, they were in another branch, and they got out. They were out for about 2 years, and then they went and joined another branch of the military. They just couldn't stay out. They just had to get back in and get active. Well, wouldn't it be good if we all just be active? Find something you can do for God until you die, until you hear that loud trumpet. Father, it is enough. It is enough that you would save us when we just ask you to. But that you would then allow us to join you in fighting your adversary. That you would allow us to take part in victories for you. There are people here, not just the preachers, there are people here who have faced down your enemies, who have won some victories for you, and they can remember what that was like. But there's some that maybe it's been a while. And it's not all sin, it's not all wickedness, it's not all worldliness. Sometimes, God, somebody just got distracted. Somebody got misdirected. And then they got bogged down and just never got back. Lord, maybe somebody needs to get back. Maybe somebody needs to join. There's somebody here that claims to be a soldier for you and they can't remember when they got in. They're probably not in. So I pray, God, maybe tonight someone will join or someone will re-enlist. In Jesus Christ's name I pray. Amen. Preacher.